المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي دل على وجوب وجوده افتقار الممكنات وعلى قدرته وعلمه أحكام المصنوعات والصلاة والسلام على صاحب الآيات والبينات سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. The month of Shahru Ramadan is amongst us. And once again, we thank Allah that He has given us the opportunity to be His guests and to be invited to His banquet. As the famous sermon of the Prophet of God says, which he gave on the last day of Sha'ban, introducing this month, Ayyuhan nas, qad aqbala ilaykum shahrullah bil barakati wal rahmati wal maghfirah. That, O people, the month of Allah has come to you with mercy and blessing and forgiveness. Shahrun huwa indallahi afdalu shuhur wa ayyamuhu afdalu al-ayyami wa layalihi afdalu al-layali wa sa'atuhu afdalu sa'at. This is that month which is considered to be the best of months. Its days are the best of days. Its nights are the best of nights. And its hours are the best of hours. And this is that month. Huwa shahrun du'itum fihi ila diyafatillah. This is that month where you have been invited to be the guests of Allah. You have been invited to the banquet of God. And whenever you have a banquet and you have a guest and you have a host, you find the grandeur of that gathering and that banquet is proportional to the grandeur of the host. Because the more the host is able to give, the more the guests they benefit. In the same way, you find that over here, this gathering has some unique features which are not found in any other gathering. For the first unique feature is that the host of this gathering is like no other host. As I said, the grandeur of a gathering is proportional to how much the host he possesses. Over here, you have that host which is Maliku kulli shay, the one who possesses everything. He has invited you to be his guest within this month. The second unique feature of this month, of this banquet, is that whenever you have a banquet, you find that it is decorated with different sustenance, that there are different forms of goodness which are given to the attendees. This is that month, this is that unique banquet where the night of Qadr is a part of this banquet. The revelation of the Quran is a part of this banquet. The descent of the Malaika and the angels is a part of this banquet. The acceptance of du'as is a part of this banquet. And the forgiveness from sins is a part of this banquet. So you see, the first unique feature of this month is that the host was like no other in this banquet. The second unique features is the khairat and the goodness which is given. The third unique feature of this banquet, which makes it like no other, is the timing of this banquet. Whenever you have a gathering, you try to pick that time, which is a prime time slot, as you say. You want it to be on the perfect day. You want it to be on the perfect hour. This banquet, the timing of this banquet is like no other. For this banquet takes place in that month, which the tradition of the Prophet, it says, Huwa shahrun avvaluhu rahma, that this is that month, أَوَّلُهُ رَحْمَةٌ وَأَوْسَطُهُ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَآخِرُهُ الْإِجَابَةُ وَالْعِتْقُ مِنَ النَّارِ. This is that month. The beginning of it is mercy, the middle of it is forgiveness, and the end of it is the acceptance of du'as and savior from the fire of hell. You find this is the third feature of this banquet. The fourth unique feature that makes this banquet of Ramadan, du'itum fihi ila diyafatillah, like no other, is the sustenance which is given. You see, whenever you invite a guest, you give him food. You give him that which sustains his body. But over here within this month, Allah, He gives us sustenance. But that sustenance is different from what we usually consume. That sustenance which He is giving in this banquet is that He is giving us the sustenance of the soul. That in this month, du'as are elevated. In this month, forgiveness is given. And amongst the most sublime of that sustenance which God gives in this month is that Allah has made the reward of one verse of the Quran recited in this month equivalent to the entire Quran in any other month. That one verse in this month. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yasin, Taha, wal Quran al-Hakim. Each of these verses in this month, it is equivalent to reciting the entire Quran in any other month. You see the importance of this month, and the secret behind this reward is that when the Quran describes this month, it does it with one description. And that description is that one which I recited at the beginning of this lecture. It is that description which is found within chapter 2, verse number 185, where Allah, He states, Shahru Ramadan, Shahru Ramadan, Alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran, Hudan lin-nasi wa bayyinatin min al-huda wal-furqan. The month of Ramadan is one in which the Quran was sent down. You see, when Allah, He describes this month, He describes it with one description and one description only. He says the month of Ramadan is that month where the Quran was revealed. Every great aspect of this month, the acceptance of du'as, the blessings within this month, the descent of the malaika, every aspect of this month revolves around the fact that the Quran was revealed within this month. That the secret of the greatness of Shahru Ramadan is that the Quran was revealed within this month. And I'll give you a tradition which elaborates and elucidates upon this point further. There is a tradition of our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. This tradition, which is found in Usul al-Kafi, volume 2, it states, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ رَبِيعٍ وَرَبِيعُ الْقُرْآنِ شَهْرُ رَمَضَانِ. It says that every single thing has a springtime. And the spring of the Quran is the month of Ramadan. You see, what is the springtime? The springtime is that time where there is warmth after coldness. There is life after death. That vegetation, those plants which were dead in the winter time, we see within the natural process that after death comes life. We see the cycle within nature. And you know, There are many benefits we can derive from technology. If you go online and you look at what is called a what? What is called a still shot. A shot over one area which continues, a time lapse, as they say. You can go and physically see with your eyes life coming after death, that this is the beauty of spring. But here a question comes to the mind. When this tradition says every single thing has a spring, and the spring of the Quran is Shahru Ramadan, is this tradition implying that the Quran was dead? You see, spring is when the dead comes back to life. And over here, the tradition is saying that the spring of the Quran is Ramadan. But no, you find this can't be the case because the Quran is more alive than your eye. Because the more truth something contains, the more knowledge something contains, the more reality something contains, the more alive it is. And in this regard, the Quran is more alive than you and I will ever be. So why is Ramadan the spring of the Quran? The answer is that it's not the Quran is coming back to life in this month, but our relationship with the Quran is coming back to life. You see, in this month, the hearts and the minds are made more receptive to the Quranic message because through this act of fasting, through our increased devotion in Shahru Ramadan, we are more receptive to grasp the grandeur of the Quranic message. So it becomes clear to us that the value of this month lies within the Quran, and thus the Quran plays a pivotal and central role in the spiritual program of this month. And that is why, based upon the importance of the Quran in Shahru Ramadan, I have picked a topic for this series which revolves around the Quran. And that topic is none other than exploring the Quranic themes and learning how to study the Holy Book. You see, this month of Ramadan is an opportunity for us to connect with the Holy Book. And arguably, this Ramadan, more than any other, is more golden of an opportunity. Because in other Ramadans, we had our social lives, we had our banquets, we had our gatherings, and this is something positive. The believers should meet with each other. But in this month, Allah has disconnected us away from everything. That with the state of the world due to COVID-19, we're living our lives in isolation in many places. Those distractions which we had, all of those distractions are cut off, and we have been given this opportunity that we connect with the book of Allah. That what is the power of connecting with the book of Allah in these times? You know, I know many people, they're feeling loneliness in these days because those social lives that they would have, their friends, their family members, they haven't seen them in a while for many of you. Many of you haven't seen your closest friends. Many of you haven't seen your uncles and your other family members, your sisters, your brothers, your grandparents. And this creates a form of loneliness. But you know, based on this idea of loneliness and the power of the Quran, there is a tradition of our fourth Imam, Imam Zainul Abidin, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. The Imam, he says, لو مات من بين المشرق والمغرب لما استوحشت بعد أن يكون القرآن معي. You know what the Imam says? The Imam says that if everyone in the east to the west perished and passed away, even then I won't feel loneliness if I have the Quran with me. That you see, Imam Zainul Abidin, he's saying that if there was no human being upon this earth and all I had was the Quran, even then I wouldn't feel loneliness. But it goes without saying that to reach this level, it's not enough to read the book outwardly. We need to reflect upon the book. We need to ponder over the book. and we need to connect with the book of Allah. And in potentiality, each and every single one of us has the potential to build such a relationship with the Quran that if we have the Quran, we feel no loneliness or shortcomings in our life. In potential, it's there for each and every one of us. But to actualize this potential, to make it real, to feel it, you find that it requires a step-by-step process. And inshallah, over these next coming nights, I'll examine that process. And tonight, the discussion, it begins by giving an introduction to that science which allows one to understand the Quran, and that science is none other than tafsir or Quranic commentary. The science of tafsir is a pivotal science when it comes to building a relationship with the Quran and learning how to study the Holy Book. But the question immediately comes up, is that was tafsir and Quranic commentary around in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam? The answer is definitely it was there, but it had a different form than it did today. You see, initially, tafsir was just the words of Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. It started with the hadith, because when the Quran is being revealed and you don't understand the Quran, the Prophet of God is in front of you, who do you go to? You go to the man upon whom the Quran was revealed. And the Quran, it highlights this reality. It says in chapter 16, it says in Surah An-Nahl, verse number 44, وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ. The Quran says, O Prophet, we have sent down the reminder to you, لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ إِلَيْهِمْ, so that you may clarify for the people what was revealed upon them. You see this verse over here, it highlights that a central function of the prophetic message and the prophethood of Rasulullah is to explain what is meant by the Quran. And in this form, you find the science of tafsir, it started. But the question that follows after this is that was tafsir just limited to Rasulullah, or did it extend to others as well? You find without a doubt, it extended to other individuals. At the forefront of those individuals is none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam. When he speaks about the Quran, the one who was the walking Quran, he says, by God, there is no single verse in the book of Allah of which I do not know whether it was revealed during the night or the day. That I know where it was revealed, when it was revealed, or if it was revealed on a mountain or on a plain. And no verse was revealed that I know not where it was revealed, about what it was revealed, and with whom it was revealed. This is highlighted, this tradition, in the At-Tabaqat al-Kubra of Ibn Sa'd in early texts. Amir al-Mu'mineen is going to show that every aspect of the Quran, I had learned that aspect. And this is why the companions, they would go to Amir al-Mu'mineen for the tafsir of the Quran. The famous tradition is there that Ibn Abbas, he goes to Amir al-Mu'mineen for the tafsir of Surah Al-Fatiha. After the time of Maghrib, he doesn't leave until the time of Fajr. They say, oh, Ibn Abbas, you discuss from Maghrib to Fajr. What did you discuss? Ibn Abbas says that we didn't even get past the tafsir of the Ba of Bismillah. That from Maghrib to the time of Fajr, Amir al-Mu'mineen spent that time giving the commentary of the Quran, doing the tafsir of the Quran. But you know, after Amir al-Mu'mineen, there were other individuals as well who would do the commentary of the Quran. For example, you find Ibn Abbas in Makkah would give the tafsir of the Quran, and he would give lessons on that tafsir. You find somebody like Abdullah bin Masud who moved towards Kufa. You find somebody like Abu Darda in Sham. All of these individuals, They would speak about the Quran and they would give the tafsir of the Quran. And you see, this reality is there that the more time passed from the time of revelation, the more the science of tafsir developed. Because when Rasulullah is there, when the Imams are there, you can ask the Imam will give you the verse. The Imam is the walking Quran, he'll tell you what it's about. But when the Imam is in occultation, when hundreds of years have passed since the cessation of wahi and revelation, then you find there is a more need to develop the science of tafsir. And this is why year after year, that time went on, the science of tafsir, it developed. But in tonight's introductory lecture, I will look at many different aspects related to the introduction to this discipline. Number one, I'll examine what is meant by Quranic commentary or tafsir. Number two, what are the goals and the functions of tafsir? Number three, why do we need tafsir? Number four, what are the prerequisites to give a tafsir and a commentary of the Quran? And number five, what is a practical tip we can implement to build our relationship with the Holy Quran? And in these 5 points, I'll give an introduction to the science or the discipline known as at-tafsir or Quranic commentary. So you find, as I said, the first point of discussion is that what does the word tafsir mean? That when we're throwing around a word and we're using it often, at the very least, we should understand what it means. Now, when it comes to language, you find there is a literal usage, and oftentimes there is a usage in that science or that discipline. Literally, what tafsir it means is at-tabyin, to clarify, to explain. And in this regard, you find in Surah Al-Furqan, chapter 25, verse number 33, Allah uses the word tafsir. And He says within that verse, وَلَا يَأْتُونَكَ بِمَثَلٍ إِلَّا جِئْنَاكَ بِالْحَقِّ وَأَحْسَنَ تَفْسِيرًا. That the best exposition, the best clarification. So the word in its literal sense, tafsir, it means to explain, it means to clarify, it means to remove a veil which is covering the face and the reality. But when I use tafsir as a discipline, when I use the word tafsir as a science, what is the definition of tafsir or Quranic commentary as a science? And here you find many mufassirin have given different definitions to the science of tafsir. Allama Tabatabai will give a definition. Another scholar would give a definition. But from amongst the best of those definitions, without a doubt, is the definition given by Sayyid al-Khuwi in his book, Al-Bayan fi Tafsir al-Quran, where Sayyid al-Khuwi, he says, Tafsir is ma yubhatu fihi an muradillah fi kitabihil aziz. That's simply, if you want to know what tafsir is or Quranic commentary is that science which discusses what is meant by Allah within His book. That the tafsir of the Quran is there to understand what Allah He means. And this is why there are many goals of tafsir. Some of them are primary and some of them are secondary. Some of these goals are at the forefront and some of them are a byproduct. For example, one primary goal of tafsir is that through tafsir, it seeks to show what is meant by the Quran. You know, the Quran, it clearly shows there are verses which are clear and there are verses which are allegorical. These verses, they require commentary, they require inner interpretation, ta'wil. You know, I'll give you an example. If someone says that Quranic commentary is not important, we don't need it, then you ask them, do you understand everything in the Quran? And you see what they reply. Because clearly there are verses which require interpretation. Let me give you an example. When you look at Surah An-Nur, that you look at this chapter of the Holy Quran, the chapter of light, which is chapter 24, and you look at verse number 35. When you look at this verse, it becomes clear that understanding the Quran is something which requires discipline. It's not something which is simple. Just look at this verse and tell me how much you understand from this verse. Allah, He says, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Matalu nurihi ka mishkatin fiha misbah. The parable, the example of His light is a niche where in it is a lamp. Al-misbahu fi zujajatin. The lamp is in a glass. Az-zujajatu ka'annaha kawkabun durriyun. And the glass is like a glittering star. Yuqadu min shajaratin mubarakatin zaytunatin la sharqiyatin wa la gharbiyatin yaqadu zaytuha yudi'u walau lam tamsashu narun. This glass is as if it were a glittering star, lit from a blessed olive tree, neither eastern nor western, whose oil almost lights up, though fire should not touch it. I ask you that if somebody says that tafsir of the Quran is not important, then how do you explain verses which have such complexities that it requires a person to dedicate themselves, and even then, he needs the explanations of the walking Quran, the Prophet of God, and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So the first goal of tafsir, goal number one, is for one to understand the Quran. The second goal of tafsir is that it allows one to bring the Quran into practice. That when we have this book, and it sits on our shelves, this book is not just a book that you bring out at a funeral, or you recite Suratul Yasin when somebody passes away. Yes, this is a blessed act for the deceased person, but this book is more than that. This book is not for the reward of the dead only. This book is for the living. It is a manual of life. The more one can implement this book, the more you find there will be success within their life. And tafsir allows one to facilitate that practice and implementation of the book. The third science, the third function of tafsir, that is that it explains the thought of the Quran. Now, these were the primary goals of tafsir, but you find tafsir also has different secondary goals. For example, a secondary goal of tafsir is that it connects the addressee to the one who is addressing, that it connects the speaker to the spoken. You see, the beauty of the Quran is that when you want to speak to Allah, you recite dua. That, remember this line. When you want to speak to Allah, you recite dua. But when you want Allah to speak to you, you recite the Quran. That's why the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they would say that read the Quran as if it's being revealed upon you. And to add to this line, since I said that dua is you speaking to Allah, the Quran is Allah speaking to you. In the same way, when you want to speak to Ahlul Bayt, you recite ziyarat. And when you want Ahlul Bayt to speak to you, you read their hadith. So you find all of these intricacies and aspects are there. And the third secondary function of the Quran is that it establishes this book as a miracle. You see, different prophets were given different miracles. One was given that staff which would turn into a snake. One was given that hand which would become luminous. One was given the interpretation of the dreams. One was given the ability to bring the dead back to life. But when Allah gave Rasulullah a mu'jiza and a miracle, He gave him the Quran. You know, it's stated that Surah Al-Kawthar was placed on the walls of the Kaaba. When it was placed on the walls of the Kaaba, people, they would look at Surah Al-Kawthar. They would be mesmerized by Surah Al-Kawthar. At that time, there was a poet by the name of Shah. They said, oh, Shah, you don't speak year round. You know, this man, He wouldn't speak. Only once a year he would speak, so that his gathering over there would have all his poetry and he doesn't waste his words and he doesn't have uneloquent words. So once a year he would speak. And anyone else, when they would want their poetry corrected, they would go to him and he would fix it for them silently. But when the Shah, they took him Surat al-Kawthar, he reads the verses, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Inna a'tayna kal Kawthar, Fasalli li rabbika wanhar, Inna shaniyaka huwal abtar. That Shah who would stay silent year round, after he says Inna shaniyaka huwal abtar, he says Ma hada min kalam al bashar, that this is not the words of any human beings, bal fawka kalam al bashar, rather this is greater than the words of any human being. So you find that this is something which becomes more clear with the science and the discipline of tafsir. So I've examined that what is tafsir? What are the goals of tafsir? But the question it comes up is that what is our need for tafsir? You know, there's an interesting question that I can pose to you. And that question is this, is that the Quran, it describes itself as mubin, as being clear, as a light. If you want to see an example, then look at chapter 4, verse number 174. Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas, قد جاءكم برهان من ربكم وأنزلنا إليكم نورا مبين. That, O mankind, certainly a clear proof has come to you from your Lord, and we have sent it down as a manifest light. So if the Quran is mubin, if it's clear, if it's a light, then why do we need something to explain the Quran? You see, it is without a doubt that the Quran is clear. The Quran is a light, but there are conditions to benefit from the Quran. When we are doing a tafsir or a commentary, we are not removing the veil of the Quran as if the Quran were covered. But no, rather we are removing the veil of our souls and ourselves. Because the ones who are pure, like Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they understand the entire reality of the book. They see every light within that book, that light which is veiled from us. So you find that this process of unveiling for us occurs through tafsir. But at the second level, not all of us are studying at the same level. Yes, the Quran is clear for the guidance of mankind. It gives everything that a person, if he wants success, he can acquire it through it. But at the same time, you find there are deeper angles to the Quran. There is a batin to the Quran. The more you study it, never are the words of Allah exhausted. You see from the first level, the Quran, it is something when we do tafsir, it is unveiling from ourselves so we can understand the Quran. From the second level, it gives a deeper look to the Quran, because although the Quran is tibyanan li kulli shay, it explains everything, it does it in a summarized fashion. We still need it to be explained at a deeper level. You know, there's a tradition of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq which highlights this point. Imam al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says, Inna Rasulallahi nazalat alayhi salat, walam yasumma lahum talatan wala arba'an hatta kana Rasulullah fassara lahum dhalika. It says that the Quran, it says to pray, but the people, they didn't understand whether to pray 3 times or 4 times, for example, until Rasulullah explained to them. So the Quran has everything in summary, but at the same time, we still need the hadith. We still need to understand it. But if we've examined the need for tafsir, the question that follows is, can anyone give a tafsir of the Quran, or are there conditions to giving a tafsir? You see, when it comes to the Quran, it is accessible to all. everyone should have a relationship with the Quran. But at the same time, I can't impose my opinions on the book. There are certain disciplines to do a proper tafsir of the Quran. In the same way, when I go into a hospital, I don't just pick up a scalpel and start cutting people up and performing surgery. No, there are prerequisites I need to understand. There are steps that I need to go through. In the same way, when you do the tafsir of the Quran, there are steps and there are different methods and prerequisites. And in the concluding portion of this lecture, I'll mention some of those prerequisites to the tafsir of the Quran in order that we can understand the intricacy of the discipline, in order that we can appreciate this discipline, which we'll examine in these upcoming nights. Now, when it comes to the prerequisites of doing the commentary and the tafsir of the Quran, you find that the first prerequisite is that one should be aware of the rules of Arabic grammar. That if this book revealed in Arabic and you are trying to understand this book revealed in Arabic, fundamentally and naturally, you should have a grasp of the Arabic language. That if you don't have a grasp of the Arabic language, then you won't understand who is the person acting, who is being acted upon, and you won't understand the power and what is meant by the book. So at the first level, a person doing the tafsir of the Quran, he must understand the grammar of the language in which the Quran was revealed. Number two, one needs to understand the meaning of the words in the Quran at that time period. You see, words they develop, words they change. And it is fundamental for a mufassir that when he studies the words in the Quran, he studies what they meant at the time the Quran was revealed, not now. Because now a word may have a different meaning. 1400 years ago, it had a different meaning. And I'll give you an example to show how fundamental this is when it comes to the science of tafsir. There is a verse in Surah Taha. This verse, which is found in chapter 20, is verse number 121. It says what? It says, Wa'asa Adamu Rabbahu Fagaba. Today, asa, it means to sin. And ghaba means somebody who went astray. Many modern commentators, when they do the tafsir of this verse, they do it based upon the modern meaning of these words, and this implies a contradiction with the concept of the infallibility of the prophets. But if they were to look deeper, if they were to understand that words, they go through alteration, the meaning, it changes slightly, they would understand that these words, this word ghawa, they originally, it meant something which wasn't useful. It doesn't imply that Adam, he had sinned. So this is an example which shows how fundamentally important it is for a person to understand what the word meant at the time of revelation. So the first prerequisite of tafsir is you have a command of Arabic grammar. Number two, you understand what the words meant in that time period. Number three, you understand the occasion of the revelation of the verse. Now, without a doubt, even if you don't know the history behind a verse, you can still benefit from it. But the moment you know at which battle the verse was revealed, whom was it revealed about, in whose virtue and fadail is that verse in when it comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen, you find that you'll derive a clearer picture of the Quran. So this is the third prerequisite. The fourth prerequisite is that one, he examines the verses in totality. And this is something which I'll examine tomorrow when I examine the different methods of tafsir. You know, every school, theological school, would take a verse and say that this is what the Quran is saying about this subject. For example, those who believed Allah has a body, they would say that, look, the Quran says Yadullah, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim, that the arm of Allah is over their arms. This goes to show Allah has an arm. We reply by saying no. The Quran also says, "Laysa kamithlihi shay," that there is nothing which is similar to him. There is no similitude for him. That when you come to the Quran, the next prerequisite of the Quran is that you understand the verses in totality, that you gather the verses of a subject and you understand that the Quran has no contradiction to get a complete picture. So you find this was the next prerequisite of the tafsir of the Quran. After that, you find that a person, he needs to look at the authentic hadith as well. That we realize that we are naqis, we have deficiencies. But there were a group of individuals who were perfect. That when you look at their hadith, they explain the Quran in its totality. That we go towards the hadith, we see that do the hadith explain the verse, and you find oftentimes they explain the verse. After that, the next prerequisite is that one should also study the opinion of other mufassirin as well. That this is a method of scholarship, that when you propose a view, you study the views of others also. And we are coming near the time of Maghrib. I'm not saying that this list is an exhaustive list, but these were just some of the prerequisites of doing the commentary of the Quran. And there are many other prerequisites, such as knowing what verse was revealed in Makkah and Medina, because each of them have a different theme, knowing the history of the Anbiya and the Prophets, knowing the early history of Islam. So it goes to show that everyone can benefit from the Quran, but this discipline, it requires prerequisites, it requires study, it requires understanding, and that journey we begin within this series. And I want to conclude this lecture by giving one practical advice on how we can build our relationship with the Quran, and that advice is to know the Quran. You see, there's a group of sciences called ulum al-Quran, the disciplines of the Quran. This ilm, this knowledge, it doesn't deal with the content of the verses, but rather it deals with different aspects of the Quran. It deals with why the Quran is a miracle. When were the verses revealed, for example, in what period? And to understand this science allows us to become familiar with the Quran. And that is why one of the most fundamental sources to build this relationship of knowing the Quran is a 10-volume series of books by Ayatollah Hadi Ma'rifat. And that series was called At-Tamheed fi Ulum al-Quran. But that book, which was originally 10 volumes in Arabic, it was summarized into a 2-volume abridgment and translated into English with the title of Introduction to the Sciences of the Quran. It's a book which is practical. It is a book which is translated well in simple, easy English, and it covers various topics related to the Quran. You know, I have the table of contents in front of me. Amongst the things that it examines is that what is the nature of wahi and revelation? That when did revelation begin? What was the beginning of the revelation of the Quran? How to differentiate between Meccan and Medinian verses, the ijaz and the miracle of the Quran. And within these 2 volumes, you find many of these topics are covered, and it is a practical way for us to know the Quran in order that we can build a relationship with the Quran. And I pray near the time of Maghrib right now that wherever people are in difficulty within this month, particularly with the disease of Corona, COVID-19, help them. And I pray that we can build our relationship with the Quran, with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time. Wal akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi